Chapter 30 The Boiling City. No one in Naoetsu was sleeping. B-29s crossed over every night, sirens wailed, and the bird spun deeper into madness. As the bombers thundered over, the bird would crash into the barracks, ordering the Americans out. Shouting and swinging clubs, kendo sticks, or rifles, he'd shove them into two lines and make them slap each other's faces. Sometimes he'd make them stand with arms raised for hours, pounding them when their arms sagged. During one beating, Louis was clubbed on his injured ankle, leaving it so painful he could barely walk. And on at least one night, the bird beat Louis to unconsciousness. Louis's job as pig custodian was over. Barge work had also been canceled, so many Japanese ships had been sunk that none came to Naoetsu anymore. Louis was back on half rations, limping, ill, and starved. He pleaded for the bird for work to get full rations. The bird brought him a sickly, paper thin goat. Goat die, you die. Louis nursed the goat and at night tied him in a grain shack. The goat got sicker. One morning the bird ordered Louis to come before him. He said the goat had escaped, gorged himself on grain, and became deathly ill, and it was Louis's fault. Louis knew his knot had been secure. If the goat had gotten loose, someone had untied him. He knew that person was almost certainly the bird himself. The goat died. Terrified of retribution, Louis hid in the barracks, but his diarrhea was killing him. Risking being seen by the bird, he snuck out, trying to get to the camp doctor. The bird spotted him and ran him down. The bird hustled Louis across the campground. Lying on the ground was a heavy wooden beam, some 6 feet long. Pick it up, the bird said. Louis hoisted it, and the bird ordered him to lift it over his head. Louis heaved it up. The bird called a guard. If the prisoner lowers his arms, the bird said, ram him with your gun. He walked to a nearby shack, climbed on the roof, and settled in to watch. Louis stood in the sun holding the beam. The bird stretched over the roof, calling to passing guards, pointing to Louis and laughing. Louis locked his eyes on the bird's face, seething. Minutes passed. Louis stood, eyes on the bird. The beam felt heavier and heavier. The bird stared, mocking him. Nearby, Wade and Tinker watched anxiously. Wade had looked at the camp clock when Louis had lifted the beam. He was increasingly conscious of how much time was passing. 5 more minutes passed, then 10. Louis's arms went numb. He shook. The beam tipped. The guard jabbed him, and he straightened. He began to feel confused, the camp swimming around him. All he knew was a single thought: he cannot break me. Time ticked on, and still Louis remained, the beam over his head, his eyes on the bird's face, enduring long past when he should have collapsed. The bird stopped laughing. Frustrated and furious, the bird jumped down, charged across the compound, and rammed his fist into Louis's stomach. Louis crumbled in agony, and the beam dropped, striking his head. He flopped to the ground. When he woke, Wade was crouched by him. He had no idea how long he'd stood there, but Wade had looked at the clock when Louis had fallen. Louis had held the beam for 37 minutes. On the night of August 1st, the sirens suddenly began blasting and the air filled with a shattering roar. Above was an awesome spectacle, wave after wave of B-29s, part of the biggest raid by tonnage in World War II. As they swept overhead, the bird raced into the barracks and shouted for all Americans to get out. The men hurried outside, and the bird began smashing them over his head with his kendo stick. Men started falling. Louis went down, and the bird pounced on him. Louis lay there as a bird clubbed him. The planes roared, and the bird and the sirens screamed. Then the planes were gone, the sirens quiet. Dawn broke, and the bird went still. Louis stumbled to his feet and looked northeast. The horizon was glowing with fire. That same night, B-29 showered leaflets over 35 Japan cities, warning of bombings and urging civilians to evacuate. The Japanese government ordered civilians to turn the leaflets into authorities, forbade them to share the warnings with others, and arrested anyone with leaflets in their possession. The next morning, Louis's diarrhea was extremely severe. He was dangerously dehydrated and struggling to force food down. The B-29s raked the sky, and the bird rampaged. As Louis crossed camp, the bird collared him and dragged him to the overflowing bango pit with several other men. He forced them to their stomachs atop the waste pits and ordered them to do push-ups. When the exhausted men faltered, the bird used his rifle butt to grind their faces into the excrement. Then he came down. Then came the day Louis had been dreading. He was filling a tub of water when the bird barked at him to come, then gestured toward the water. Tomorrow, I'm going to drown you. Louis spent a day gripped in fear, looking for the bird, thinking about drowning. When the bird found him, he was terrified. I have changed my mind, the bird said. He lunged at Louis and began punching his face, alternating right and left fists in a violent ecstasy. Then he stopped suddenly, serene. I'll drown you tomorrow, he said. Then he strolled away. Louis could take no more. He joined about a dozen officers in a secret meeting. They decided to kill the bird. The plan was simple. They'd leap on the bird and pull him to the barracks top floor overlooking the river. There, they'd lash him to a rock and shove him out the window. When the bird struck the water, the rock would carry him under. He'd never draw another breath. The officers divvied up the tasks. One group would make a plan to capture the bird. Others would find a heavy rock and sneak it upstairs. Louis was tasked with stealing rope to lash the rock to the bird. The rock crew somehow got a large boulder into the barracks without discovery. Louis couldn't find rope long enough, so he stole shorter ropes and tied them together. They looped it around the rock and dangled a dangling end ready to be lashed around the bird. The conspirators discussed who would join the group that would capture the bird and throw him to his death. Louis volunteered. On the morning of August 6, 1945, a B 29 skipped off a runway in Tianan Island, next to Saipan. Pilot Paul Tibbets guided it north toward Japan. In his pocket were poison cyanide capsules. If the plane crashed and the men were captured, they'd swallow the capsules and kill themselves to avoid revealing the new, world changing secret weapon that sat in the bomb bay. A 12-foot long, 9,000-pound bomb called Little Boy. It was an atomic bomb. Crossing the inland sea, Tibbets saw a city ahead, Hiroshima. As the plane crossed over it, the crew donned shaded goggles. Below, Tibbets saw a T-shaped bridge, the target. The bombarder lined up on it. At 8:15:17, the bomb slipped from the plane. Tibbets turned the plane sharply and dove to gain speed. It would take 43 seconds for the bomb to reach detonation altitude. No one knew if it had that brief time. The bomber could get far enough away to survive what was coming. A crewman counted seconds in their heads. He hit 43. Nothing happened. For an instant, he thought of the mission had failed. Exactly as the thought crossed his mind, the sky over the city ripped open in a storm of color, sound, and wind. A white light, 10 times the intensity of the sun, enveloped the plane as the flash and noise jolt of it skidded out in all directions. Tibbet's teeth began tingling and his mouth tasted of lead. He would later be told it was the metal in his feelings resonating with the radioactivity of the bomb. The entire sky was swirling in pink and blue. The co-pilot scribbled 2 words in his diary: My God. The tail gunner saw an eerie, shimmering warp in the air, ripping toward them at 1,000 feet per second. Here it comes, he said. The shock wave slammed into the plane, pitching the men into the air and down again. Then came a second wave, a consequence of the force of the explosion, hitting the ground and ricocheting up, and the plane heaved again. At a POW camp not far from Hiroshima, a prisoner felt a shudder, and the air warmed strangely. He looked up. A fantastically huge, roiling cloud, glowing in bluish gray, stood swaggering over the city. It was more than 3 miles tall. Below it, Hiroshima was boiling.